cardinal has spoken publicly. He did so in writing and without ambiguity, and what he said about the traditional Mass is bringing to light a picture that many did not expect. Because behind words that recall unity and tradition, we can glimpse a thread that unsettles, raises questions, and calls into question what for centuries has been considered untouchable. Why has this text come to light now? And what does it really reveal about the future of the liturgy in the Church? Stay until the end, because what appears to be a simple disciplinary action actually reveals much more. Cardinal Blas Kupic's stance against the traditional Latin Mass does not come in a vacuum. It fits into a specific phase in the Church's life, marked by documents, interventions, and silences that, taken together, outline a coherent path. This is not an isolated statement or an off-the-cuff personal opinion, but a written, published, and reasoned contribution that openly vindicates the legitimacy of the suppression of the traditional liturgy as an instrument of ecclesial unity. The text in question, released through official channels of the Archdiocese of Chicago, argues that the existence of a single rite within the Roman Rite is a necessary condition for preserving the unity of the Church. It is on this assumption that the Cardinal justifies the application and implementation of Traditionis Custodes, presenting it as an act in continuity with tradition, not as a break. The traditional Latin Mass is thus implicitly described not as a treasure to be preserved, but as a divisive element to be overcome. First and foremost, the timing is striking. Kupic's intervention comes after an extraordinary consistory that attracted international attention and, in reality, focused almost exclusively on the topic of synodality. In the final moments of that meeting, a document on the liturgy attributed to the prefect of the Dicastery for Divine Worship circulated among the cardinals. A text that provoked immediate reactions and widespread media coverage. In this context, Kupic's reflection appears as a stance that reinforces that line, not as an independent voice. The central point of the cardinal's argument is contained in a formula repeated several times: a single rite. A formula that is presented as a Catholic principle, but which in its concrete application raises questions. In fact, the text makes no substantial distinction between the historical plurality of Western and Eastern rites and the unity of the Roman Rite. Everything is reduced to a single need to standardize in order to unite. To support this thesis, Kupic explicitly recalls the authority of Pius V, citing the Bull Quo Primum of 1570. According to his interpretation, the assertion that in the Church of God there should be only one way of celebrating justifies the suppression of the traditional Latin Mass in favor of the new Missal. It is on this point that the most vocal criticism is focused. The Bull Quo Primum, in fact, was not born to abolish ancient rites, but to prevent the proliferation of new arbitrary liturgical orders following the Council of Trent. The text explicitly authorizes the continuation of all forms of the Roman Rite that can demonstrate a continuity of at least 200 years. The traditional Latin Mass falls squarely into this category. Presenting Quo Primum as the basis for its suppression is therefore judged by many scholars as an inverted reading of the document. It is within this framework that the intervention of Bishop Athanasius Schneider fits in, who underlined that Catholic unity has never been synonymous with liturgical uniformity. The history of the Church attests to the legitimate existence of multiple rites, all expressing the same faith. Ambrosian, Dominican, Mozarabic. Recognizable organic variants, never considered a threat to unity. Cupich's position, however, seems to deliberately ignore this plural tradition. In his text, the concept of one rite is applied without distinguishing between reform and cancellation, between development and suppression. The post-conciliar liturgical reform is elevated to the sole expression of the lex orandi of the Roman Rite, while the previous liturgy is effectively delegitimized. Making the issue even more delicate is the silence that followed these statements. There have been no denials or official distancing. The cardinal who promoted the document at the consistory has remained in his post. Cupich himself, despite having long since passed the canonical age for resigning, continues to hold office. This state of affairs is interpreted by many as a sign of continuity, if not implicit approval. Meanwhile, reactions were not long in coming. Liturgical scholars called the use of quo primum intellectually dishonest, accusing the promoters of the restrictive approach of bending history to political expediency. This would not be a pastoral evaluation based on spiritual fruits, but a strategy aimed at normalizing a specific ecclesial vision, in which tradition becomes an obstacle. The contrast with other emergencies is stark. While efforts to limit the traditional Latin Mass are intensifying, dozens of North American dioceses continue to declare bankruptcy due to unresolved scandals and multi-million-dollar settlements. Parishes are being closed, assets sold, communities dismembered. Yet, on these fronts, the same determination, the same urgency, the same peremptory language are not being observed. The paradox is evident. A liturgy that has nourished generations of saints is treated as a problem to be eliminated, while moral, financial, and pastoral crises of historic proportions seem to remain in the background. Cupich's position, read in this context, is not merely a liturgical choice. It is a declaration of priorities. What emerges, ultimately, is a vision of the Church in which unity is pursued through reduction, not through integration, through control, not through continuity. The traditional Latin Mass becomes the testing ground for this approach, not because it objectively divides, but because it represents a visible link with a tradition that cannot be easily reshaped. The debate, therefore, is not over. On the contrary, it appears destined to intensify. As long as the issue is approached as an administrative problem rather than a theological and historical reality, every intervention will continue to generate resistance. And every silence, in turn, will continue to speak volumes. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment Amen. God bless you.